Welcome back, everybody, to Crash Out Comics, a true comic book podcast. My name is David, also known as the Omnibus God.
I'm Yuhu, aka Yuhu Comic Review.
I'm Brendan, also known as Decent XP.
And I'm Chris, otherwise known as Chris L.
Moving on to episode 2. Today, we're mainly talking about dynamic duos, second generation, legacy characters, things like that. So to kind of start it all off, we wanted to talk about creators. So when looking at comic book creators, there's always a creative team. So we wanted to talk about our favorite dynamic creative teams in comics. So to start it off, I will go. So when I think of a dynamic creative team, my absolute favorite has to go to Brian Michael Bendis and Mark Bagley. There could be a little bit of an argument for them not, being like up there because of the lack of work that they have together. They really mainly only worked on Ultimate Spider-Man, but they have that world breaking record with 111 issues, I believe it was, beating Stan and Jack. Having that many years together working on the same book with the same characters and still being able to see them evolve was so amazing. There's a little bit of a bias as well because I'm a big Spider-Man fan as well as Ultimate Spider-Man, but I really do think when those two are together, it's the best work I would say that each of them do. I don't know if that's crazy to say. I think Bagley is at his absolute best during Ultimate Spider-Man, and I don't know. Personally, to me, Ultimate Spider-Man is Bendis' best work. So when you get them together, it's just awesome. So much so that when Bagley leaves after issue 111, I do think Ultimate Spider-Man does kind of take a dip in quality. I don't know if that's just because of Bagley. I think in general, the plot was kind of getting silly, but definitely they amplify each other so much.
Definitely have to agree. I would totally say that Bagley is definitely at the top of their game during the Ultimate Spider-Man era, and especially Bendis too, because that was right before the takeover, right after he started writing basically, what was it, 8 or 9 books at once?
Something like that, yeah. So it definitely was the start. I think it's what proved him to be one of the top guys for Marvel.
I feel like if you're gonna go dynamic duo, they have to work on more than one book together, though, right? Ultimate Spider-Man's cool, but it's just one story.
Well, it's not
I don't necessarily agree.
I wouldn't say it's just cool. That's kind of crazy to say. I think
we got some other picks on here we can get to later, but besides Ultimate Spider-Man, people know Bendis for so many things, right?
And they know Bagley for
Bagley for so many different things. You think about duos, you think about Lee and Kirby. These guys, two peas in a pod. You think about some of the other picks we got on here, 2 peas in a pod. You think about Bagley, he's running around with other guys all the time.
Oh my God.
Too, okay? They got their little rotation. Okay.
I think it's something where it's it's not just the quantity, but the quality. The quality of Ultimate Spider-Man is up there when it's Bendis and Bagley. And sure, you've got guys that have worked on more projects together, but are all of those individual projects as good as Bendis and Bagley on Ultimate Spider-Man? I mean, it's just that.
I'll be honest, dude. I think Alex Maleev on Daredevil is more impactful for me personally.
But that's
Alex
the same
Maleev and
case.
Bendis, gorgeous, right?
They did less, but they did less work than him and Bagley.
More with less.
And I disagree.
No, bro, you're not cooking with that one, brother.
I disagree. It's crazy because you get to see Bendis becoming Bendis with Ultimate Spider-Man with Bagley, and you get to see what Bagley is able to evolve into and shift into and pivot from the 90s. When you look at his Ultimate Spider-Man art and you look back at his original Marvel stuff like New Warriors and then even his Amazing Spider-Man stuff with McElhaney, it's there, but the shift is so crazy. Obviously, there's big factors like the fact that he's drawing a younger Peter and just in general a younger cast, but his penciling techniques are a lot different, and he, I think, comes a lot to his own while still taking a lot of the old techniques that he had in the 90s, and it's kind of just definitive Bagley. I think when you think Bagley, you think Ultimate Spider-Man, not just that title itself. I'm talking that style, because then moving forward, that's how Bagley would draw Spider-Man, right?
If I'm not mistaken, I feel like the shift, I mean, not for the interiors, but at least for the covers, there was a big difference in the way Bagley's art looked because of new technology, especially coloring techniques and stuff that made Bagley's art look just unlike it ever had in the 90s. But I mean, I do agree. There's like an evolution of Bagley's art, but I don't know. I don't know if it's like as crazy as an evolution as like looking at like a Jim Lee. You know, I think Jim Lee from the '90s compared to Jim Lee from the 2000s, that's like night and day, in my opinion.
I wouldn't go night and day, but I
Yeah.
see what you're saying too. I think I see what you're saying. To me, I think Bagley from the 90s to 2000s is more drastic. And I think it's not just in, you bring up a great point. The coloring in the 2000s, specifically for Marvel, was like a game changer, and it is like it's a defining era of like comic book art. But like it's also just how Bagley drew these characters' anatomy. It's how he drew them moving. It's like the scale of it all. It's him shifting to bigger panels and kind of more of like that wow factor. It's those things that I notice that I'm like, this is why it's his best work. And then Bendis, I mean, just to cap it off here, this was like, if I feel like if it's not for Ultimate Spider-Man, you don't have Bendis having that crazy run at Marvel. Like, this is Bendis proving himself. He was picked up for Ultimate Spider-Man as an indie writer. He had come off of Powers, I think.
No,
We're
I
both
think
talking
I
about Powers.
know. I think Daredevil was first, actually.
Was it? I know. Regardless, it's that time where of Bendis's career where it's like they're giving this guy a chance because he had just come off of being, like more of an indie writer and creator owned projects. And like, sure, Powers sounds cool, but I'll take Ultimate Spider-Man any day. And I think that's what solidified him. And also, I'll end it on this. Sure, they don't have that many projects together. It's mainly the one book, if not the only book. But the fact that they did it for so long, and that's what fans wanted to see for so long. Like, you don't have a creative team together working so well together if it's not well received. You know what I mean? Or if it's like, and I'm saying that as a fan and as one of the creators and even like editorial. Like, if they see nothing broke, they're not going to fix it. And I don't know. To me, like I said, it shows even more when Bagley leaves after, the 111 issues. And to me, Ultimate Spider-Man drops in quality. And that's like not a shot at David LaFuente or Stuart Immonen, even though I do think LaFuente's art is ass.
Well, I actually really like LaFuente's art. I know a lot of
Is
people hate on
LaFuente,
it.
is he
but
the one who does like the where he does like the captions on the side where it basically reads like a novel? Do you know what I'm talking about? Where he does
No,
like
that's
the blasted
Bagley.
outsides?
No,
Is
that's
Bagley
Bagley.
does that too?
Yes.
Mm.
LaFuente's the Disney Channel ass dude.
Oh, when Peter's got the round, when
LaFuente's
Peter's got
art
the
makes
round
so
head.
much sense for Spider-Man though. Like, it's a fucking high school story about this kid running around with a bunch of other high schoolers. Like, of course it's gonna look like a Disney
That's what
Channel.
Bagley was doing too. And Bagley
Bagley
said
made it look real.
it
I don't
felt
know.
cooler, like it's
I
sleeker.
I think it's different, and like maybe Bagley's is more like stylistically grimier, not even grimier, but like it just, I guess it feels more adult. I don't even know what that means though. But no, I like the LaFuente style. I think he gets way too much hate because I think it's really entertaining. Let's talk about a creative duo who like actually has worked on more than one book together. I know Chris has a really good pick for this one.
My pick for best artist and author pairing is, of course, the legends Jack Kirby and Stanley Lieber. They worked on a bunch of they worked on so many Marvel titles, all the definitive ones. But you can go back even further than that and chart some of their monster work and some of their Western work. But I want to talk about the superhero stuff because that was what was definitive and what changed the game. Mainly the Avengers, some Thor, and Fantastic Four. I think that when they flow together, it can really just be like perfect symbiosis. If you look at interviews and you look at how they talked about the creative process, it really was just two dudes tossing ideas back and forth, and everything stuck. Almost like everything stuck.
My guys broke the record, by the way. But like I think the biggest thing is how much more credit one guy gets than the other. And that's
True.
with Lean. And look, I understand that like nowadays, at least the smarter audience in the comic community understands the true contributions that Kirby had, not just to the books with Lee, but to comics. It doesn't change the fact of how like much of a chud Lee was. Like he just wasn't even putting in the work, dude. Lee was not putting in the
Chud is
work.
crazy.
Like,
I
and
think it depends on the era because like early days there definitely was more collaboration, but once he turned into the businessman and they started doing more of like the TV spots and like the Merry Marvel Marching Society and stuff like that, then he definitely shifted away from it.
I feel like that happened pretty early on though. Like I feel like Lee was kind of becoming that, flashy funk man pretty quickly. And if they're working on so many titles together, it's just adding to his resume, where he's going on interviews looking all fly, with the chain on and the watch on.
Yeah.
And he's like getting all the credit. So you
Yeah.
created Spider-Man, the X-Men, the Fantastic Four, and it's like I can't deny the impact that they had on the comics that they created. Right? Fantastic Four is amazing. To this day,
Yeah.
I love Fantastic Four comics. But it doesn't change the fact that like a lot of the reason that we love those titles so much and those characters ultimately is due to Jack Kirby, but the credit goes to Stan Lee.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Maybe I'm tripping. Maybe that doesn't change the fact that they're still a dynamic
No,
duo.
no. You're cooking there, David, because
You are,
you
yeah.
can't be a dynamic duo if you can't share the spotlight together. You know what I mean? Like there's got to be a
Oh,
balance there. You
Yeah.
can't just expect one person to take all the credit for the work that's being done by two people. I don't know.
I feel like
Yeah.
that's why it definitely depends. Like early days, Stan definitely had a different way of presenting the artists and the other writers to people. People knew who they were, and their names would be brought up. Like one of the earliest pieces of Marvel merchandise that you could buy, you could send away, and you could join something called the Merry Marvel Marching Society, and they'd send you a membership card and a little record, and the record had all of the bullpen artists like their voices. They talked on the record and they're like, "Hey, like I draw this book and I do this. What are you doing, Stan?" So I think there was definitely a different type of collaboration before what people would call like the Funky Flashman era, because I think that he turned into that character like right before the 70s.
I think too, like just the fact that Stan drove Jack out of Marvel along with other artists like Steve Ditko. And it's like what did Stan really do after that? I think like after those initial creations with those characters where he had these guys, he starts shifting more into like the executive role. He starts shifting more into, like again, the face of Marvel. And like, obviously I know he becomes an editor at one point and like the president, but like does that not feel like a coincidence? I feel like if Jack had stayed, we probably still would have seen Stan Lee as the president of Marvel, but also he writes these books still. And I think that just shows why he didn't do that, because his golden boy left. And so it's kind of like it's kind of like playing like pickup basketball, and you've got the one dude that's making all the shots, but the dude that's like making all the crazy passes and alley oops is like, "Oh, did you see that? I'm so good at this game too." And then the dude who's making all the dunks leaves, and all of a sudden this guy's like, "I'm gonna start coaching now because that's how good I've got the mind, so I'm gonna start coaching now." So
Low key, he's not even passing. He's shooting and missing. And
it's
then
like the
Kirby's hitting the
Sometimes it
rebound.
goes in, sometimes it doesn't.
there's a Blake Griffin commercial where that literally, I can't remember what it is. I don't know if it's like for insurance or I can't remember. I don't know what it is, but there's this commercial where this dude is like teamed up with Blake Griffin, who's like a basketball player for those of you who don't know sports. And every time he shoots, he's like swish and he looks away, and then Blake Griffin just grabs it off the backboard and dunks it in. That's
exactly
literally
that.
Stanley.
That's exactly
Perfect.
that.
Great pick, Brendan. Good analysis.
Thank you.
Yoo-hoo, why don't you tell us your pick for your creative duo team?
Yeah, no, we're talking a lot about, oh yeah, Mark Bagley broke records, Stan Lee made comic book history. But what about people who reinvented the medium constantly with every single book? And
You
that's why
dog.
I gotta pick Grant Morrison and Frank Quietly. As y'all know,
Mm.
Grant Morrison is my go. I love Grant. They are such a highbrow writer that sometimes their ideas can be too ambitious to put onto the page. And that's my biggest problem with Grant Morrison's work, is that it gets too heady, too timey-wimey, and you get confused. You don't know what's going on, and you could get kind of lost in the sauce. So you have to find a creator that can match your swag. And Frank Quietly is one of those few people that have the ability to always meet Morrison where they're at. Not only is Morrison like challenging and changing what the comic book medium is like capable of, but Frank Quietly is showcasing action in a way that like not a lot of creatives do. Frank Quietly's action is cinematic and explosive, and it leaps out of the page. I know Mark Bagley has some really beautiful splash pages, but the way Frank Quietly plays around with like paneling and framing and like splash like cuts and stuff like that just makes you take a step back and be like, what? Like, I've never seen a comic book like this. Maybe it's because it's so challenging to draw. Maybe it's because it's Frank Quietly's style. Maybe it's somewhere in the middle. But like, you think about a house style. Jack Kirby was the house style. You know, Mark Bagley. Everyone was trying to be Mark Bagley for a long time. No one can do what Frank Quietly does. I haven't seen someone do a Frank Quietly action piece the same way Frank Quietly does, and no one can write a story that Morrison does. So when you put those two fools together on a book, oh my god, it goes crazy. X-Men, Batman together, Flex Montalvo. They did this book called We Three, which is just this beautiful story about like animals, and it's honestly one of their most impactful works. And I didn't even see it coming. It's just you can't match that, in my opinion, at least in the comic book medium.
Yeah, I think something else like a story you definitely didn't mention there that you have to is JLA Earth 2, man. Like that is probably one of my favorite DC stories that I've read in a long time. Like when you initially dropped Grant Morrison, Frank Quietly, I was thinking to myself, I'm like, I don't know, are they that great? Like I was thinking about it. I'm not always a huge fan of Quietly's art, and I'm not always a fan of Morrison's writing. But when you put the two together, they have some pretty strong chemistry. You know, like JLA Earth 2, New X-Men, All-Star Superman. So yeah, I think you picked a really strong one there.
Nah, you kind of cooked with that one, Yoo-hoo. That was pretty good. You were getting me with the Quietly stuff. Quietly is one of my favorite artists, so you're definitely cooking with the way that Quietly illustrates his storytelling. He is a technical master when it comes to comic book art. Definitely one of the best. Here's what I'm gonna say though. When you're looking at Jack Kirby, Stan Lee, at this point, Bendis, Bagley, I think it's safe to say that their best works are with each other. Jack and Stan, probably their best works, maybe Fantastic Four, right? That's like Stan's best work.
I don't think so. I think people would say like Fourth World is Kirby's best work.
That's good. Yeah.
People would also probably say, you would probably say Spider-Man is Stan Lee's best work. So what are you talking about?
Okay, no, that doesn't fall. That doesn't fall into my argument. So I disagree.
He got you with that.
Okay,
so what's your favorite Stan Lee comic, Omnibus God? Tell me. If it's not Spider-Man, what is your favorite Stan Lee comic?
Okay, it's Fantastic Four. Yep.
Easy money.
It
do
is.
do you have a wall of books dedicated to Fantastic Four?
That's crazy.
Yeah,
okay,
yeah. It's his favorite.
Whatever.
It's his favorite member. It's
Fine,
his favorite
whatever.
member.
The point is, Bendis and Bagley, their best works are Ultimate Spider-Man.
I don't think
and they're
so.
doing it. Yes, dude. What?
Daredevil is Bendis' best work.
Ultimate Spider-Man, at least the first like 50 issues is better than that's more than Bendis' time on Daredevil, and that's better than Daredevil. 100%.
No.
Daredevil by Bendis is not this thing.
All of a sudden, someone's a Spider-Man fan.
Oh, okay, wait.
Morrison's best work is so expansive. Like, everyone's gonna have a different answer. There will be people that say All-Star Superman. There will be people that say New X-Men. There will be people that say We Three. There will be people like me. Mine is Batman and Robin. That's my favorite Morrison work.
No, it's not.
Frank, sorry, my favorite's Animal Man. But like Batman and Robin is one of my favorites. Okay, and the point is that Morrison has just like a bibliography that is unmatched. And so you can't be like, this is Morrison's definitive best work, because someone.
I mean, so does Stan and Bendis. You could say the same thing for those.
I don't think anyone is gonna say that Jack Kirby's best work is like
Fantastic Four. Yes, they will.
Coming of Galactus.
I think a lot of people are gonna say Jack Kirby's best work is his solo stuff, or maybe even Captain America. Like, I don't think. I think you're putting too much. You were literally spent the first half of this episode talking about how like Stan Lee's writing was like not very great because it didn't give a lot of credit to the artist, and now all of a sudden you're switching up and you're saying that like actually this is his best work though. Like, what is it?
Well, I just think okay. I didn't want to say this. I didn't want to get to this point because I don't want to disrespect Morrison, because I do think that Morrison is one of the greatest writers of all time. However, when you put those two together, they're a great duo. 100%. You cooked with your little, synopsis on them. But I really do think that Quietly carries them together. I think Quietly is carrying that book. When I talk Bendis and Bagley, I think those two are 1A, 1B, one brain. Quietly is carrying Morrison. You kind of said it yourself. He's reeling Morrison in. JLA Earth 2.
That's not what I said.
Well,
I said he's matching Morrison's swag.
No, that's it's
There's
like
not a lot of artists that can take a story about animals getting like viscerally abused and tested on and turn that like into a like hyper violent and like surrealist looking book that also has you feeling for these animals. You want to know why? You know what happens when you try to make an animal look hyper realistic? It's hard to empathize with them. That's why the Lion King flopped. Okay, because like they just look like animals. Like there's a twinge of humanity you have to convey.
But we like animals.
That's fair. I don't know what I'm going on.
No,
but the point is, right? The point is, like, Morrison and Quietly together, they don't hold back. I think that is when like Morrison is going full in and Quietly is going full in because they can do whatever they want. All-Star Superman is Morrison at some of their most Morrison. Okay, New X-Men is one of the few Marvel projects Morrison has worked on, but I think that is Morrison's most Morrison Marvel project. Okay, I think We Three is probably like outside of superhero work, some of the most like concise and like to the point Morrison story I've read that like isn't a DC superhero book. Morrison has a lot of different lanes they can kind of pivot into, but their work is like consistently defined by this obsession with the surreal, and that surrealist element is hard to capture for a lot of artists. That's why the other New X-Men artist, Igor something, he does not match Morrison's swag. Okay? There are times where you can have an artist that can't match Morrison's swag. So I don't know what you're talking about. Frank Quietly has to reel it in. No way, dude.
No, I'm saying Frank Quietly carries. Because I don't think you have JLA Earth 2. Matter of fact, that's a perfect example. Morrison's whole JLA run is this like oversaturated, super wordy, just not even Morrison-y, just bizarre and ridiculous run with a great artist, by the way, Howard Porter, probably the definitive Justice League artist. And it's just not, it doesn't hit. You don't get the best JLA Morrison work until Quietly shows up. And it's because of the technical prowess that Quietly has and demands. Quietly is not going to work on a book that has a bunch of needless narration boxes that Morrison just generated on their computer. So because Morrison knows that, the story has to shift. And yes, Morrison has great ideas, but if not for Quietly, any other artist, I don't think you're getting JLA Earth 2.
The reason JLA Earth 2 is so good is because of the way JLA Earth 2 contrasts the two different worlds. The reason it's so good is because...
And how is that illustrated?
Let me finish. The reason is because the writing is able to showcase what it's like for this Elseworld Batman or Earth 2 Batman to meet this Earth 1 Batman. And like, there's a lot of palpable tension there. That's not an idea. Yes, Frank Quietly's art showcases that, but you know who came up with the idea to put these two characters together? It wasn't Frank Quietly. It was Grant Morrison.
Okay. Okay. I'll concede on that. You're lucky. I do love that team, but again, I think it's mainly because Quietly carries. I think you replace anyone else on there. Like, who else is going to do All-Star Superman to that degree? Who's going to make All-Star Superman that memorable?
No one, and that's why they're the GOATs.
Okay, you got me. All right, let's look at Brendan's choice now.
Yeah, so I mean, my pick might be a little controversial in the sense that like there are definitely like some really well-renowned, great duos, like the ones you guys have already mentioned. But for me, this one I hold really special in my heart because of a particular story that they've written together. That's Tomasi and Gleason. In particular, I'm referring to Supersons. I thoroughly enjoyed this story. I think it is it's a perfect example of like what we were talking about there, where you don't have that synergy with like Lee and Kirby because Lee's kind of dominating a little bit, but you see that balance here. You know, like the writing tells a story just as much as the art does. And like they have so many iconic runs together. Batman and Robin, Superman, Supersons. I would say even arguably the Green Lantern Corps. I have no complaints whenever I read these stories written by them. I thoroughly enjoy them. This is one of the few Omnis I think I'm going to go back and reread.
I really like their Green Lantern Corps stuff. So that is a good pick. Brendan might once again have the like true like how he did
No,
last time with Jeff
listen,
Johns.
I love Tomasi and Gleason on Batman and Robin. That's like one of my favorite Batman stories of like modern times. But I do think that Gleason's art kind of like teeters on house style. I think it's
You're
really
tripping.
I think the Batman and Robin stuff, it's beautiful, but like it's nothing crazy, right? Like I think it looks like any other artist at that time. Like it looks like a new 52 artist. It doesn't look like something like a Frank Quietly
Wait, wait,
piece
wait,
that's
And because he did
elevating the
art in the New
medium.
52.
Like
Exactly, I was
What
gonna
are you,
say,
what are you
yeah, but like
talking about?
every
What
other
are we on
52
about right now,
artist,
bro?
right?
Like,
dude, no.
Okay,
Okay,
I want to put a disclaimer out there. I want to put a disclaimer out there right now. When I first read Super Sons, because I'd heard so many great things about it, I originally found Gleason's art a little bit off-putting. I wasn't fully at home with it, and I think if anything, that emphasizes the fact that they are not a house artist or house right. Like the fact that I dove into this and I immediately wasn't like, oh yeah, this is what I like, this is what I'm used to. But as you like get through the story and you actually, I guess, become familiar with Gleason's art, you learn to love it. You know, I can't see this as a house artist
it's
realistically.
not. That's so
Maybe it's
crazy.
because I only read their Batman and Robin work. I don't think it looks like one to one with what Greg Capullo was doing, but there's so much Capullo-isms in the way
No,
Gleason draws Batman specifically as this like big figure, right? And I
it's
think
the
there's
concept. It's how
there's a roughness to his face, and it just looks like very familiar, and it doesn't seem like anything that was like changing the game of
they're
Batman.
drawing the same guy during the
Yeah,
same
but like
era
there's
wearing the
other
same
artists
suit.
during that era that like Jason Fabouk's New 52 Batman looks nothing like that, right? He's like, well, he's chiseled. His muscles are like bulging through his shirt. His jaw is like
So
popping out
because they
outward rather than downward, right?
so
Like
because because they have different anatomy, or sorry, so because they have similar anatomy, Capullo and Gleason, that makes them like there's so many artists that have similar anatomy. Anatomy is probably the one thing that you're gonna see the most consistency in.
and I think that's why to be a game changer, you need to do it different, and that's what Quietly does. That's what Kirby
Yeah,
did.
yeah. I'm
And
gonna
you know
stop you
what?
right there. You want to
That's
know
what
what's something that's different? The fucking Super Sons, bro. I ain't never seen anything
why
like
is
this
Super
before.
Sons different?
Okay?
Is it because of Gleason or is it because of Tomasi?
find me a
It's
find
both.
me a freaking
It's a
find me a
beautiful
panel
mix.
with Batman
They
in
are
there,
the
bro. I know
vanilla
he
and
doesn't look like
chocolate
him.
to a swirl. Okay.
I think Gleason's artwork is not only distinct enough, but when you look at like his Batman or just DC work and compare it to other artists, I think unless you're a casual, which I mean, no surprise, you who it's pretty like defiant on who Gleason is.
Dude, I just realized that Gleason's like on TikTok and he might like watch this video.
And it's staying
Gleason, let it be
on. We're
known-
getting
I stood by
Make a-
you the
make a-
entire way.
the bold, like heavy blacks that like he's always emphasizing. I always think of the Blackest Night Green Lantern core issues, but like every time I think about his Batman, I think of like a wide Batman.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas with Capullo, I think Capullo kind of does like a like a lean Batman, like it's very lean. Like I think of
I think
Gleason's
they're
Batman,
both
and
pretty wide, in my opinion.
I feel like Gleason's kind of like that silhouette. Like you think of that Batman silhouette.
Yeah, I
Or-
can see that.
You know what I mean? Whereas Capullo is like there's more texture to Capullo as well.
Mhm.
I will say this, and I love Patrick Gleason's art, and I don't want to disparage it because I want Patrick Gleason to know they're an amazing artist. And one thing I love about their Batman and Robin run that I think kind of gets lost to time because now when we read stuff like that, it's in retrospect. It's not like in the time period. But you think about what art looked like pre New 52, and you did have like Jim Lee, and these are guys that were doing art style that is very like detailed and kind of like hyper realistic. I think David would describe it not as like cartoonists, but like more so and working towards like a realistic style. And then you look at New 52 artists like Capullo and Gleason, and they're drawing Batman to look more cartoony. He looks kind of like the 90s like Norm Brayfogle Batman meeting the realism of Jim Lee's Batman with like the build of a Frank Miller's Batman. And it is a hodgepodge of so many ideas that really makes these character designs stand out. We've talked about the best artistic duos in comic books, but What about the actual comic books themselves? What about the people who are in these comic books that are making these comic books come to life? Who are y'all's favorite dynamic duos in comic books?
Absolutely. My pick is the Super Sons. I think the Super Sons brings everything to the table that the dynamic between Batman and Superman does, but it's a new, fresh take. You get to see these basically miniature versions of their fathers with still their own unique perspectives and opinions. Obviously, with Batman's interactions through Superman, Batman has kind of opened up. He's learned to trust a bit more. You know, he has a family, he has friends. John isn't necessarily there yet. He isn't willing to, make these new connections because he doesn't trust everyone. And he's also, I would say, a bit of a pessimist. And on the other hand, you have John, who's like an optimist, who's just so excited to see the Batcave and meet Damian, and he's just super friendly. It's like they're complete opposites. And I think what's really interesting about this series is as you read through it, you get to see, I guess, Damien kind of come out of his shell in a way. You know, like at first he's very closed off. He's unwilling to interact. He's unwilling to socialize. And then at a certain point, he wants to hang out with John. And then after hanging out with John, John encourages him to get to know other people his age. And that's where you get the Teen Titans run, right? And I think just you get to see the strongest points of each of these characters, right? You have Damien's skill and prowess and like his technical ability, and obviously like his skepticism around other people. And that lends to helping balance out John's like hyper optimism, his like openness. He's almost like the equivalent of like a tourist. You know, he's not very aware of what's going on around him, but he's just happy to be there. You know what I mean? And so you have like these two characters, much like their fathers, but also so very distinct. And I think seeing that perspective and that dynamic and seeing these characters mold and grow together is phenomenal.
Yeah, no, shout out Super Sons. I love Damien. I love Jonathan Kent. The little I've read of them, I haven't actually read Super Sons, but I have read stories that feature both of these characters, and you can tell these are two guys that just they have a lot in common. They have a lot of passion there, and I really rock with that. I think Damien is just one of my favorite characters in general. He's such a tragic Robin in the sense that like it's the inverse of any other Robin story where the Robins find Batman, but in this case, or Batman finds the Robins, but in this case, the Robin finds Batman, and that in itself is such a cool way to showcase.
Didn't Tim technically do that too?
I guess, yeah, you're right, you're right, you're right, you're right. Point being though, Damien, his upbringing is so tragic, dude. Like you really break down who this kid is, and he's been through the ringer, right? His mom, his grandfather, lack of love growing up, like a lot of discipline. He's a human weapon, and then you got Superman's son coming in, this big ball of kind of like joy and optimism, but also a lot of insecurity. And it's like it's like that perfect dynamic. It's like the angry friend and then like the sweet friend. You know how there's like that spicy cat, sweet cat dynamic. There's always like you gotta have pepper with your salt. You gotta have pepper with your salt. Sugar with your spice, whatever. They're kind of like that yin and yang in a lot of ways.
Your
The same
six
way
with your
Superman.
seven. Sorry.
Yeah,
sorry.
you're funny, dude. You're funny. Kind of like what you would think of like a year one Batman Superman relationship to be like. But then you like think about comics and we don't really have a lot of stories like that, like where Batman is like outwardly like, I don't like you, Superman. I don't trust you. I'm edgy. I'm emo. Because there's always like a part of Batman that is like willing to endure and willing to trust people to some degree. And so I think a lot of people's headcanon is like Batman is this evil guy that like just doesn't want to rock with Superman and it takes a lot of trust. But you're be hard pressed to find a comic book where Batman is actively like, I hate Superman and I don't want to team up with him unless it's like an Elseworlds book, or like The Dark Knight Returns. And so I think Damien and Jonathan Kent are kind of like the headcanon version of Batman and Superman to a lot of people. And I think that's a big reason why they're so interesting is because it takes something that seems like it should have happened so many times and actually does it.
I remember when Super Sons was coming out, I wasn't like fully reading comics at the time. I was kind of starting to get back into them. And my manager, he was reading Super Sons. And like I was talking to him about it because he was a big comic guy. And he was like, dude, you got to check out this Super Sons. It's so good. He's like, I've actually got like the first 5 issues in my backpack right now.
I should read this one. It's pretty good.
Nah, I'm good off that.
Who's that by?
This Greg Pak and Jai Lee.
Is that New
Jai
52?
Yeah, this is like their origin.
Oh, I
Yeah,
see.
this is like how they first meet in the New 52. It's quite good, and it gives what you're asking for. Like when you were talking about Super Sons, I was like, there's a book like that.
And they
Just
are
don't-
like always like low key buddy though. It's like
Sometimes.
it's like one issue where they're like, "Oh, I don't trust you," and then immediately after that, they're like, "Hell yeah."
Loki, huh?
Let me
I
see.
was
Unless
about
it's
to
like
say it's a good thing you said besides Elseworlds because I was about to be like, yo, Frank Miller loves pitting them against each other.
Mhm.
I mean, like I feel like all Elseworlds do, like Frank Miller, Injustice. Um, there's got to be more.
Somebody's got to make an Elseworlds where they don't fight each other.
Someone needs to make an Elseworlds.
Yeah,
where they
Red
love-
Sun.
Oh, dude, Red Sun. That's like the only good thing about that book.
Batman.
Is the Batman stuff. Red Sun is it's crazy because Red Sun is the one book that is like the least Miller-esque, like the least Mark Miller-esque,
And it's Doom.
but it's
You
the
know why?
worst. Why?
Because it's an idea that Morrison came up with.
No
Right.
way. Really?
Yeah, that was, we
Morrison
talked
and
about that.
Miller actually came up with that idea together, and they pitched it to DC, and DC was just like not super into it at the time. And then like Miller kind of came back later with the idea again, and they greenlit it. But also like Morrison's New 52 Superman was also part of that pitch.
And Wade's Birthright and parts of All Star Superman. It's really strange.
Wow, I did not know. That makes a lot of sense because that definitely does feel like, oh, there's Superman. I'm like, what if Superman landed in Russia? Oh,
Yeah,
if
yeah.
he was raised by the Soviets? And the idea is, Superman as an idea, he doesn't change.
I just got a good idea.
The politics of Superman. There's no politics in Superman. Superman's for humanity. Fucking, I hate
Man,
Morrison. Low
They
key.
should have gave Proletariat Superman the T-shirt and jeans. That would have gone so hard.
Yeah, no, Red Sun is such a letdown, bro. I feel like it's only because of like the
That's funny because I loved Red Sun, but I got rid of it because I'm like, I don't want Mark Millar in my collection.
I'm
But
gonna
like,
send
I
you the
actually
absolute
really
edition.
liked it, and then I was
Really?
like, I got to get rid of it though because I
What
was
touch it?
proving a point to David that I didn't like Mark Millar. But it's funny, that's like one of my favorite Mark Millar stories.
I remember liking what they did with Brainiac because I know they tie it to like American imperialism, kind of, don't they? Where they like captured him and they use him.
I was really racking my brain thinking about like what my personal favorite dynamic duo in comics is, and then it dawned on me. You see, this is kind of a special pick because in 1981, comic books were in a weird place, and there's a character in 1981 who was about to like his comic was about to get canceled. Today, he's one of like Marvel's most like popular street level characters, but back then, people weren't buying his comics. But this little known author artist named Frank Miller wrote and penciled a Daredevil issue 168. That is the first ever issue written and penciled by Frank Miller. And that is also the Daredevil issue where we meet Elektra. And I think Daredevil and Elektra
Ooh.
together are such an interesting dynamic duo because they have so much in common. There's so much tragedy to both of their backstories. They have a lot of the same skills, they have the same mentor, but in that same vein, Elektra's kind of like an anti-hero. So sometimes she's working with Daredevil, sometimes she's working against Daredevil. And with recent years, with something like the Zdarsky run, she kind of takes up the role of Daredevil in the absence of Matt Murdock. And so I think the evolution of Elektra as a character, and whenever they're on the same page together, working together, it is magic. It is just pure bliss, ecstasy. I love how infatuated Matt Murdock is with Elektra. I think if you like go read the Bendis run, there's lines where he's talking about, he's like, I could smell the glisten of her skin. I know that sweat stench anywhere. It's Elektra, you know? And it's like, this dude is just so into Elektra, and it's like visceral, but it's kind of cool, like how much he likes this girl. And she just like brings out a side of him that no one else brings out. Matthew Murdock is such a broken boy. Okay. Like he keeps it together, he keeps it composed, but when you really get down to the core of who Matthew Murdock is, this is a guy that doesn't know what to do. And so Elektra plays with his emotions and can kind of like bring out the vigilante side of Daredevil and the warrior of Daredevil in a way that no other Marvel character does. And so when they're soaring and when they're both in it and they're in the mission and they're in the zone, they're a pairing that I'm just infatuated by it. And there's so many great comics. That's my pick for the best dynamic duo.
That was a nice switch up. I did not expect that. Matt and Elektra, Daredevil and Elektra are very much like they have that romance, but also there is so many stories where it's like it's just kind of a partnership, like fellow vigilantes, fellow crime fighters. And you don't really get that a lot with love interest. I mean, obviously like probably more modern Batman, you kind of have that, but you know, it's a little different. And then like everybody else's love interest is like just like a normal person, right? Like to so much to the point where like they tried to force Mary Jane to be some super hero with Spider-Man. You
Yeah,
know,
the only other example I could really think of is like Hank Pym and Janet, and
yeah, that's a good one.
we
Yeah.
all know what happened there. So
I mean, it's also cool just to see like the love interest take up the mantle, right? Of like the main hero or whatever. Like imagine if Catwoman became Batman.
My pick for best dynamic duo in comics is, of course, the age-old classics, World's Finest, Batman and Superman. My favorite rendition of their relationship usually is when they're friends. It kind of changes up depending on the continuity or the story, you know. And as time evolved, we kind of have we're like in a weird place now where their relationship is they're friends who butt heads a lot. And that's kind of where I like it because fundamentally, like when you break down Batman and Superman, like to their core, they're two people who don't want to see another person die. And they both understand each other on that level, like very, very well. And I really like seeing their conversations that delve into that kind of thing, you know?
I will admit though, I think I do fall a lot for Batman versus Superman propaganda because
Mm,
I love that shit. I love
yeah.
Batman beating the crap out of the god.
come
The
on.
only cool thing about BVS is like how angry Batman is, and I
It,
think
it, it is a
Mm,
pretty faithful adaptation of that fight, at least, you
Mhm.
know? And I think
yeah.
that's cool. But I don't know. I think the Batman versus Superman dynamic is fun, but like I was talking about earlier, it's such a common trope in Elseworld stories. Like you got Dark
Mhm.
Knight Returns, you got Injustice, you got Injustice 2, you got Red Sun. There's so many versions of Batman. Like Sean Murphy's universe, I think, is building up, like his White Knight universe is building up to have the White Knight Batman confronts Superman. And it's like, dude, we've seen Batman fight Superman so many times, both in mainline comics and in Elseworld comics and like in movies now. And it's just like, I think a lot of people want to see these guys stand buddy buddy next to each other.
One of my favorite Batman Superman stories. It's not really a Batman Superman story, but it's a story that shows Superman and his relationship to his friends, and it highly features Batman. It's an issue from like 1959 that is like the key to Superman's fortress, and it shows Superman in his fortress, and he has all of these themed rooms, and one of them is for Batman, and it has this crime device. It's called a crime solving device, and it's literally a computer that can just solve crimes. And he says, like, I built this for Batman. He's my best friend. Like, and if something were to ever happen to me, like I can give him this machine and he'll be able to solve all of the crimes in Gotham with no problem. And it just shows like how much Superman is thinking of him like all the time.
Yeah,
That's
I actually hate Tom King's Batman run. But I think the one great thing about Tom King's Batman run is how it explored Batman and Superman's relationship.
Mhm.
Right before the wedding, they have like a bachelor party. They go on some date. They go on like a double date together. And I
oh
think
yeah.
like Tom King doesn't get a lot right about Batman, but it's really cute to see how Tom King kind of portrays Batman and Clark to be these two guys that are so like stuck in their ways. They're kind of like hyper masculine freaks if you think about it. Like Clark is a
Yeah.
farm boy from Kansas who has a hard time expressing his emotions as Clark Kent. And Bruce Wayne is like a traumatized child who like to this day has a hard time opening his heart up to people. These are two guys who have fallen in love with each other as like brothers, but they don't have the ability to like share that sentiment very often. And so when they're
Mhm.
just like out of the uniform and they're sitting there and it's kind of just an awkward silence and you know they are appreciating each other's presence and they're appreciating the peace of the moment, but they just don't know what to say to each other.
The thing to highlight too is that a lot of these confrontations that we talked about that are tired is the reason that they even hit or matter is because we have that idea that they should be friends too, right? Like the Dark Knight Returns, that moment hits really, really hard for me personally because right after Bruce has his heart attack, all the soldiers come up on him, and Cal's immediate reaction is to like put his hand up at them and say, "Don't touch him." And it in a way, it's like lovers, right? They're like lovers. They have this bond with each other. But because it's an American comic book, we're not going to get to see Batman and Superman kiss.
I was gonna say, I think Yoo-Hoo is right in the fact that like a majority of people definitely would rather see them being friends. I think obviously because of the origins, again, World's Finest from the get, it's showing them like arm in arm, marching together and stuff like that. Uh, and even though I personally like a good Batman versus Superman, like Superman Batman Yowie, bro. I think that's really what we need, dog. Like so much so that one of my favorite Mark Millar stories is The Authority. And in that book, like through Stormwatch, are the characters Apollo and Midnighter, who are pretty like clear. I don't want to say knockoffs, but they're pretty clear, like, this is supposed to be our Superman, this is supposed to be our Batman. And they are lovers, like they are partners. Apollo is like this super being who can fly, and again, he's basically a Superman. And then Midnighter is the dark guy with the leather costume with the mask, and he fights, and he has all these like he actually has powers that like deals with like him interpreting people's moves and stuff like that. So it's very much like these characters that were created to be like, hey, what if we what if Superman and Batman were lovers? What if they did kiss? And I love it because as much of a piece of shit as Mark Miller is, a lot of people do tend to agree that the chemistry that he's able to have with a queer male couple is actually pretty great. You have this moment that I love so much where Apollo just absolutely gets his ass kicked and he's like beaten up, face bashed, and Midnighter is holding him as he's like bashed up and torn up and beaten. And he's like whispering to him and he's like, look at you. You're so beautiful. Do you know how much I love you? And it's so sweet because then again, you replace that and you're like, what if that was Batman with Superman? It's like, dude, yeah, I think that's what we need. I think we need Batman, Superman, Yowie. I think them as lovers, definitely them as friends. And just all around them kind of being together no matter what.
In Tom King's run, there's a moment where they like switch costumes, so you see them undressed, and you see Clark put on the bat suit, and you see Batman put on the Superman suit, and it's tight, maybe it's a little sweaty, you see them take it off, you see them put it on, you're like, yeah, they're wearing each other's clothes right now.
Yeah, for me, I gotta go Punisher and Spider-Man. One, it's cool to see Punisher become his own thing. Obviously, over the years, he's a really interesting character. I think at the time he was a really unique character, and it kind of he was kind of the genesis of that type of anti-hero where it's like, no, we need to stoop that low. So the Punisher character, as just itself, is really dope, and introducing him through the Spider-Man comics in the Spider-Man comics, like it just makes sense. It works because Spider-Man is that character that is very hopeful. And obviously, I think when a lot of people think of the Punisher, especially with like other media, it's really cool to see Spider-Man and Punisher work together because it is like the old veteran hard guy who is again doing some really crazy stuff when you look at like morals of superheroes. And you have then Peter, who's like this young quippy guy saying he's gonna figure it out. And so like seeing those two work together, it's like Peter has to like kind of balance like, hey, no, I'm actually serious, you better not kill anybody.
I gotta be real, bro. Like, I don't know why this relationship is more unique than like Punisher and Daredevil, or Punisher teaming up with like any other Marvel hero.
I think Spider-Man has more of an impact on Punisher's character development than Daredevil ever has.
Yeah,
Like,
I mean, first appearance.
well, first appearance, but not just that. I'm not even just saying like him being in these comics. I'm saying like you see them working together, and it's like when Daredevil and Punisher work together, like Punisher will still kill someone, and like Daredevil will be like, Frank. Like Spider-Man will web his gun off of him and be like, dude.
I mean, that's not true though. It depends on the comic.
It does depend, but like it's more interesting too. Like Daredevil and Punisher are basically just one and the same in the sense that they're just guys, right? Like Peter is this metahuman. He's this super
That's
powered
not
being.
true either, because Daredevil is a super powered being.
Why? Because he freaking isn't blind. Because he's a blind guy that
He's
isn't
got
blind.
like, I think
Radar
he's got like
sense.
enhanced strength and radar sense, and
He doesn't have enhanced strength.
It depends on the take you're reading, but I'm pretty sure in certain takes he does have enhanced abilities.
No, he doesn't. I don't believe that. That's not true. He does not have enhanced strength. He's a normal guy who
He just flips around.
literally he's just acrobatic. He has the radar sense, yes, but so does Spider-Man. Spider-Man has a better radar sense with spider sense.
That's not even true, because there's literally a comic book where Spider-Man loses his eyes and he goes to Daredevil and he's like, how do I work as a blind man? And Daredevil has to teach him how to like move about the world. And you know what? His Spidey sense doesn't do jack,
Because he can't see.
so he doesn't have a Spidey sense. He just uses his eyes to bounce.
No, well, actually,
it's not a
in the-
sense.
in-
It's not a seventh.
no,
sense.
in that issue, yeah, you're right. You kind of got me. You're right. Spider-Man goes to Daredevil to try to figure out how to work his spider sense without his vision. And then when Daredevil teaches him that, Spider-Man like picks it up and he's like, "Oh yeah, I don't need to see. I can just trust my spider sense."
Okay.
So it shows that the spider sense is more adaptable. Peter just needs to lean into it.
I don't know. I just feel like the Daredevil Punisher, or sorry, the Spider-Man Punisher pick is just kind of lame. I think it's the weakest one here. I think, like,
I mean, first of all, Chris went the safe route, right? There's that. You like went the unorthodox route.
the
and then-
unorthodox route, and it's like the bet. Like it's literally Frank Miller's first ever.
Yeah, but
written
like
Daredevil
nobody's
comic.
thinking
How is
about
that
no.
I want you to
unorthodox, bro?
cut clips of you glazing our takes back in right here, please.
Okay, that's fine, but like Punisher and Spider-Man, it's like opposites, but also
Name
again,
5
it's,
Punisher Spider-Man stories.
you have the debut.
think he's gonna know.
You've got Gang War, his involvement in Gang
You
War.
hate Gang War.
Gang War was bad, but the Punisher issues were the best part of it.
Okay.
Because it's Spider-Man again going in there and saying, like, hey, this is a lot going on. I don't need you involved as well. He's saying that to Frank.
Okay.
And Frank's like, nah, dude, they're all right here. I could literally
Keep
just
going. Keep
shoot
going.
this
I got
person.
it. I got it.
There's the issues towards the end of the Keith Pollard run where they team up there. Jigsaw, there's an issue where Spider-Man and Punisher fight Jigsaw. There's the Mark Waid issues during Brand New Day where they team up.
So you're saying these are 5 of the best. I go read every single one of those stories, and that's like defining their relationship, and that will give me an
Yes,
insight
because there's
characters
progression
that
throughout that.
is unlike, you know, the way Frank Miller does with Punisher, or unlike the way Frank Miller or, you know, Bendis does with Punisher in his Daredevil run, or Brubaker does with Punisher.
Punisher
or
is
Zdarsky does with Punisher.
They
I think
use
that is more consequential character development than Spider-Man
No,
being like, Frank,
because-
don't kill these guys, man.
no, because
Let me
because
whip up his
in
gun
the
so we can't pull the trigger.
Matt does,
No.
dude.
Meanwhile,
He's like,
Daredevil's
"Frank,
like,
don't kill
you
him."
don't know what it means to be a human being. You know, like it's crazy.
Yeah,
Meanwhile,
and
Spider-Man's like,
that's
no, he's gonna shoot somebody. Oh my
that's the
God,
opposite.
guys,
That's
Jigsaw.
that's the
Well, now-
opposite of character development because every time they put Punisher
Also,
in a
character
Daredevil
development
run,
is when Spider-Man says, "Hey, man,
no.
stop
If
killing
you
people."
let me get to the
And then
point,
he
I can
leaves
tell
and
you what the
keeps killing
character
people.
development is. If
Okay.
you let me get to the point, I can tell you what the character development. The character development is during the late 70s and 80s when Punisher is appearing in Spider-Man comics. It starts off with Punisher being the Punisher and killing people to then teaming up more with Spider-Man and him actually using non-lethal weapons to the point where it you do have those moments where Spider-Man is webbing the gun off of Punisher's hands because there's real bullets in there. It moves then to Punisher telling Spider-Man, "Don't worry, these are non-lethal bullets." And the Punisher is not killing people. His whole gimmick of killing people stops with Spider-Man.
Yeah,
That's
and then
not
he
only
kills
a
people in his
respect that he
mainline
has
books.
for Spider-Man, that's
And then
not
he
only a
kills people in his mainline books. It's almost like the
And the-
writers just wanted to put a cool character
Yeah,
in the
oh,
comic. So they
that's
found a
what they do
loophole.
with
They found a
Daredevil. That's what they do
loophole.
with Daredevil. They
actually
only
kills
throw
people.
no,
He
they
doesn't-
only
he doesn't put his pride aside and says, "I'm not going to kill these people."
because he doesn't respect Matt Murdock. He doesn't care about
does.
Daredevil. No, he doesn't because he kills people in front of him.
Oh
He
my
doesn't care.
God,
And
you're
actually, you know what?
stupid.
That shows how flawed of a character
No,
Daredevil is.
The Spider-Man writers don't respect Punisher. They just want to, you know what? They don't
No,
respect
they
Spider-Man
do.
because they
They
need a cool
do, because-
character. They need to give Spider-Man a cool character because no
No,
one cares about
Spider-Man is the cool
Stop.
character, buddy.
You know?
Spider-Man is the cool character, dude. Listen, Brubaker, I'm reading Daredevil Brubaker right now. They literally just threw the Punisher in there to be the cool guy, to be the it's a Punisher. Like
That's almost like every single 80s Spider-Man comic.
No, it's not, because
they literally
there's
have to give him lethal bullets. Meanwhile, you read his mainline books from the 80s and he's mowing
Listen,
people down.
maybe you should read
no
those.
Characterization.
There is,
bro. They just wanted to use his likeness because he's cool.
No, that's literally you're arguing. What you're arguing applies more to Daredevil than it does for Spider-Man.
Yeah, then
you would know that if you read the Spider-Man issues.
Lethal bullets. Tell me.
What'd you say?
Tell me the Daredevil comics where he uses non-lethal bullets. Meanwhile, he's killing people in his mainline run. That's happening at the same time.
Well, I don't know if he had a mainline book during the Keith Pollard issues when they teamed up there, and then versus Jigsaw. I don't know. It was the late, or it was like early 80s. Like if he did, then I don't know. But but my point is, you're arguing
in other books. I guarantee you. There's no consistent character.
Okay, so then that just shows you why they're such a dynamic duo. Then
because he's a cool guy, he looks cool.
No, because when he's with Spider-Man, he decides to be a better person. When he's with Matt Murdock, when he's with Daredevil, he does not care. He does not care about Matt's opinions and morals.
Guns, Punisher shooting guns because they really want to find those cool action shots. So they're like,
dude,
non-lethal bullets.
Tripping.
That's how we can have him shoot people with Spider-Man swinging next to him. That's how we sell the issue.
There's no There's also a lack of consistency with Daredevil. Like again, in the Brubaker issues, when they're in jail and Punisher also goes into jail because we got to put the Punisher in there. It's cool, don't get me wrong, but Punisher is killing people in front of Daredevil, and Daredevil just he's like, Frank.
What's he supposed to like? He tries to stop him. There's nothing.
No, he doesn't. In the Brubaker issues, no, he doesn't. He cares. He cares about himself, and he's like bugging out because of Foggy. And so he's just like,
he's in jail.
Guys, we're obviously not going to agree here about whether or not Punisher is Spider-Man or
Listen,
dynamic duo.
At the end of the day, Spider-Man makes Punisher a better character. Spider-Man does that with a lot of different characters. And honestly, screw it. I'm changing my pick. The dynamic duo is Spider-Man and anyone. You want to know why? Because they literally made a Marvel team-up book focusing on Spider-Man teaming up with people. So screw it. It's not Spider-Man Punisher. It's Spider-Man and your favorite hero. That's the dynamic duo because Spider-Man is goated. Screw you.
A good dynamic.
He kind of cooked with that, low key.
You actually cooked, dude. Yeah,
he didn't. Don't
that the Marvel team up. No, me changing the opinion. Yeah.
The reason Marvel team up exists is because Spider-Man sold books. That's it.
Yeah, and so they teamed them up with anybody and everybody.
A cool-looking character on the cover.
Have you ever read Marvel Team Up? That shit's fire. The initial run is gas.
Yeah, the original Marvel Team Up stuff is amazing. You know why? Because again, it's Spider-Man and someone else. It's Spider-Man and your favorite hero's favorite hero.
Yeah, you also wonder who did they pick to team up with Superman, bro? Spider-Man.
Boo! Thank you! Yeah, Daredevil's not getting the team up book, buddy. Get out of here.
Let's talk about a consistently good comic book duo. A comic book duo that has defined the legacy of comic books, arguably. It's the duo that pops up in everyone's mind. They are literally called the dynamic duo, and that is Batman and Robin. We read 6 issues of a comic book series called Robin and Batman. This is by Jeff Lemire with art by Dustin Nguyen. The first one came out in 2021, and then they released another 3-issue series in, I believe, 2025 called Robin and Batman Jason Todd. This is Jeff Lemire chronicling the origins of Dick Grayson and Jason Todd and his own unique pitch. Jeff Lemire is also working with Dustin Nguyen in this one, a person he worked on with another book called Descender for Image Comics, which is one of my personal favorite comics of all time. Dustin Nguyen's art is just like this beautiful watercolor looking finish. And they do a lot of really interesting things with the Robin and Batman dynamic in this book. I know this is a really controversial book because Jeff Lemire characterizes Batman as a little cruel and a little authoritarian, but I loved it. And I guess we're going to have a little bit of a general discussion about it. I guess we'll try to keep it spoiler free for the most part, so you could still read this book if you want to. We might talk about specific moments here and there, but I love this book. I think it is the best way to characterize Batman in an Elseworld, because I like it when you break down who Batman is at his core. Because if you think about it, right, there has to be a psychopathic justification for a grown man to recruit a child to fight crime with him, right? Like, we don't think about how bizarre that is enough. And I think Jeff Lemire forces you to confront that absurdity. Even if Batman is like a good parent in the mainline comic books, if you really analyze it, it's just a little twisted. And I think that's why I love it, is because it like forces you as a reader to confront that. And I know this is the first time y'all read this series. I guess we can go around the circle, starting with Decent. We'll do Decent Chris and then Omnibus God. What did you guys think about Robin and Batman?
Yeah, Robin and Batman, honestly, like you mentioned, this was my first time reading it, and I absolutely loved it. I leaned more towards the first series, and the second one, I found that the take with Dick Grayson was a little bit more interesting than Jason Todd. Um, but I think it's really interesting to see a Batman and Robin story from a Robin perspective and not a Batman perspective. You know what I mean? I feel like most stories, they take place and the person monologuing is Batman. But now we get the perspective of, a young Dick Grayson who's trying to become this protege, who's trying to, like, I don't know, stand out from the shadow that is the Batman. um and we get to see what that really looks like, right? And also, like, with the transition between Robin and Batman to Robin and Batman Jason Todd, I think we see some serious development on Batman's side as well, just in the way that he's able to empathize and understand and parent. So I thoroughly enjoyed both of these stories. They were phenomenal, and the art was spectacular too.
Probably my favorite thing was the narration coming from Robin. I don't think I've ever read a Batman story that was just like that was a story with Batman that was from the point of view of Robin like that. I've read like the Tim Drake solo Robin stuff, but that's just him by himself. It really felt like two broken children trying to relate to each other for both series. I really liked moments where Bruce overstepped his boundaries to try and do something nice for Dick. And I really liked his sort of confused parent attitude for Jason, where he was just like, I've tried everything and I know how this should work and it's not working. Like, what do we do? It was really beautiful. They were both really beautiful stories. They were beautifully told and beautifully illustrated.
The beginning of the book starts with Dick journaling his thoughts and his feelings on how it feels to like be in the mission and how it feels to be a part of the Batman project as Robin. And to me, that just felt like Jeff Lemire kind of tipping his hat to year one and being like, what if it was Robin writing the journal entries? What would that sound like? And like off rip, I think it immediately establishes that like this is not Batman and Robin. This is Robin and Batman. You're going to understand it from that point of view. And that's why I just like, I think a lot of people have issues with the characterization of Batman in this book. But if you read this book from the perspective of a 12-year-old child trying to like grapple with the fact that like this is their life now, it makes a lot of sense because like there's such thing as unreliable narrators in storytelling, right? So like every Batman book we read is from the perspective of Batman. Do you think it's going to be completely objective in how Batman's methods are always helping people? Like there is a lot of harm in the project of Batman that we don't think about because we're only thinking about it from Batman's perspective. So you flip that, you think about it from this young boy's perspective whose parents just died, isn't getting adequate therapy, isn't getting help from anybody else besides this like emotionally closed off man who's training him to be a child soldier. Is it really out of character, or is this what a 12-year-old would actually feel like? Sorry to go on a tangent, but like Omnibus Scott, what do you think about this book?
I'm there with you guys. I think the perspective of Robin, specifically in the first one with Dick Grayson, you kind of get to see more of the frustrations that maybe every Robin can just kind of have. I think when a lot of people think about the Robins, you know, obviously with the second book being Jason Todd, it's always like, oh yeah, Jason's like the trouble child, and he's the one that's like always fighting back. But you kind of get to see that like that's maybe just a thing with the Robins because of the situation that they're in, and because of how Batman is. And I think looking at it as just like, the characters themselves, you kind of get to see that evolution of Batman changing with each Robin. And you kind of get to see the importance of each Robin, but that's like a main line, right? This story kind of just puts you in there, so it's like you just get to understand it right away through the perspective of the Robins. I think for me, I've said this before, um and I think a lot of people kind of think about this because they always bring up this book. This is the good version of All-Star Batman and Robin the Boy Wonder, because you have this like kind of just, I guess mean, rude Batman that is ultimately talking about recruiting a soldier opposed to recruiting a partner or even adopting a child. And it's him bringing this kid into a war, right? And the difference is when Miller does it, it's very crass, it's very just like harsh and very like ow, like in your face. And I think I have thoughts on All Star Batman. Maybe we'll talk about that in the future episode because I do kind of rock with it a little bit. But Lemire finds that healthy balance where it's like this feels realistic, and this is also, you find out through the second book, Robin and Batman Jason Todd. This is also just the beginning. So you who has brought up to us the hate, and maybe he can talk about it a little bit more since he's researched it, but like the hate that the book gets by certain people because they feel like it's not a good characterization of Batman. But one, it's an Elseworlds tale, so let the writer kind of have a little bit of free roaming. And two, I do think it's like ultimately just highlighting the fact that again, Batman is recruiting soldiers, and that's been told through different Batman stories. Batman has called his Robin soldiers before. There's actually a great point that I'll connect to later. But it's again, it's a developing story. So when you see Robin and Batman, the Dick Grayson story, Batman is very strict. He's very stern. He's awkward, like doing things like reading Robin's journal, partly because he definitely wants to know what's going on. You've got the second issue where he's sending Robin in to investigate the Teen Titans.
That was such a crazy,
Crazy issue.
That was
So
probably the best of all the 6 issues I read.
Yeah.
There's a mic
100%.
drop moment at the end of the issue. Oh, dude, it was heartbreaking.
Yeah. And it's a good call. I think it's a good callback to, and again, this shows you that Lemire's also doing his homework. I think that issue is a great callback to Tower of Babel. Because at the end of Tower of Babel, when everything kind of gets fixed up, you have those moments in the last issue where Wade is writing that the Titans are looking at Nightwing weird, and the Teen Titans are looking at this point it was Tim. They're looking at Tim weird. So like they're treating them differently. Like they're thinking like, well, what if did Batman tell you to snoop on us? And like there's this conversation where Wonder Woman is like this is what you did. Like you doing this to us. Now they're thinking that Dick and Tim are gonna do it to them. And so I think it's a good kind of callback to that.
It's one of those things where you have to understand that like Batman doesn't think about the repercussions of his actions with people in his family because he does all of these things as like a a unilateral actor, but he doesn't realize like the Bat family is impacted by what he does. And I wanted to bring up another point really quick, and I guess y'all can kind of spitball off of this too, but I think when we think about Dick Grayson's stories and we think about Dick Grayson as the first Robin, not a lot of people think about the actual history of the character because if you trace the legacy of Batman comics, issue like 400 is the start of post-crisis Batman. And so at issue 400, that's like the Batman we know, right? Everything before that is technically not canon, right? Unless, I mean, it depends who you are. Like maybe the Denny O'Neil stuff in the 70s is canon. I don't know. But like the Golden Age, not canon. The Silver Age, not canon, right? Bronze Age, kind of canon depending on the author, which means when issue 400 happens, Robin is already Nightwing. And Jason Todd is about to become Robin, which means we don't actually have a lot of like mainline comic books that show us Dick Grayson as Robin. Every single like story we have understanding Dick Grayson as Robin is told through a miniseries or told through flashbacks. There's no mainline run that focuses on exploring the relationship of Dick and Bruce during their like early years, at least to my knowledge. And so that's why I think it's always interesting when people talk about like Dick Grayson as their favorite Robin, because it's like, what are the Dick Grayson Robin comics people are thinking about, you know? And that's why I think this is also such a cool exploration of that, because we always have the privilege of foresight when we do a flashback. We already know what Nightwing is. We already know what he's become, you know? And so it's like, I mean, when they were writing Robin in the 60s, they didn't think he was going to become Nightwing. They were just going with the flow. But now, like, you get Chuck Dixon doing like a Dick Grayson flashback, and he knows Robin's Nightwing, so he's gonna tell a story with that in mind. And I'm just kind of curious, like, what did you guys think? How do you think Lemire handled the fact that, like, there isn't a lot of like mainline continuity Robin stories, and maybe we don't know what that looks like in reality. A lot of people just kind of project their own head canon.
I think it's good to present these things and kind of show that it's not all sunshine and rainbows, that because yeah, we do have the benefit of hindsight, but it is a crazy thing that Batman's bringing in this kid, and it might not be of his own volition, or he might not like 100% enjoy it. And that is something that's really, really cool to see that I don't think anybody ever really considers, because I've read like a few of those Robin miniseries that you're talking about. And for the most part, I think a big thing about Dick Grayson that a lot of fans interpret, or at least that like I get from him, it's like a fantasy, It's like, oh, I get to fight crime after he takes down the dude who killed the Graysons. It's like, now I'm a superhero. Like, I can do cool shit, and he really enjoys it. So it's cool to see that it might not be that fun.
Yeah, I think a lot of people just take probably from, I think probably the most impactful story, like that's technically in main continuity, definitely after year one, is probably Dark Victory, right? Like that's the book where it's like, here's Robin. And I
And then
think,
even then, technically, I don't think Dark Victory is canon.
yeah, no, that's what I'm saying. So
Mm-mm.
I think it's just like, I still think that's probably the most impactful Robin story. And then from there, at that point, and then from there, it's, well, you've got other media, so it's like the Teen Titans show and the Robin and Batman Adventures show and stuff like that.
It's kind of like what David said in terms of how people perceive Dick Grayson as Robin. It is an amalgamation of many things. Like you have like those Elseworld stories, but you also have, like he mentioned, the TV shows, the movies, like the stuff where you get to see, the stuff that an average person would perceive as, oh, this is what Dick Grayson is. Um, and yeah, like people do have that perspective of like, oh yeah, Dick Grayson is like the light that kind of helped open up Batman to being a kinder and gentler person. But something that I really like that Lemire kind of explores here is the impact that Batman almost has on Robin, right? When Dick Grayson is picking out, what is his fit gonna look like? He asks himself, like, what should I name myself? What should I look like? And he's like, should I call myself something darker than Robin? I don't know, right? But he chooses to be Robin. But a part of him does question. He's like, I don't know, maybe I should go for something darker like Nightwing. Like maybe that's something that it would fit.
Dude,
what
I
Batman
love
is doing,
about that specifically too is that it answers the age-old question, like, why would Batman make a little boy wear
Well,
like a bright yellow and green suit, like running around like a human target? And the
Mhm.
answer to that question is because that's what Robin, like Dick was literally thinking that. He was like, I hate this guy. I want to be the opposite of him because
Yeah,
he's
the
just like, he's
antithesis of Batman.
infuriating me, right? And so
Yeah.
he like makes the costume that's like bright and yellow and bold because he knows it's gonna piss off Bruce. And it's like,
Yeah.
no, that's such a great point you're
I've
making, Brendan.
I've heard, I don't know where I've heard it. I'll try to find it and maybe put it in post. But there's some run or somehow it's brought up that the reason that before this, right? That the reason that Robin's costume is bright to contrast Batman's like dark costume is because Robin is supposed to be that distraction in combat situations. So I've
Mm-hmm.
always thought that was an interesting thing where it's um like it's kind of similar to, how they said like Batman has the yellow circle, and like the retcon to that was because he wants to have a target, so if they are going to shoot Batman, it's the yellow circle that is most padded, so he doesn't get weighed down. That's kind of like what they said with like Robin, where it's like, yeah, he's the bright colorful kid jumping around, and while they're paying attention to him, Batman swoops up and then starts punching them and stuff like that, or beats them up.
Yeah, I
um,
guess the thing about that is that like Jeff Lemire's Batman is a very twisted fella, but I don't think he's twisted enough to like purposefully want to put Dick Grayson in the line of danger to be a distraction.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't
Well,
know.
'cause
In
that's
the
like one of
beginning,
the well, that's like one of the first things they talk about is Bruce is like worried that he's gonna bring home a dead soldier.
Exactly.
Omnibus God mentioned earlier that it's like a play on what Frank Miller did, where he had Batman call the Robins soldiers, and he had him call them good soldiers. But this almost feels like a rejection of that idea with the ending where they hold each other after
Mhm.
defeating Croc, and he calls
yeah,
him a good boy.
I
feels like a
I wrote that
rejection.
down. I wrote that
Yeah.
down
Okay.
because it's like that feels like Lemire. Not even talking about All Star Batman, but it's the moment in the Dark Knight with
Hmm.
Carrie Kelly where they're on the bat copter or whatever, and she's holding him, and Batman's holding her, and he's like, good soldier," and it's like it's cool because they're embracing, and he's like telling her like, "Hey, it's gonna be okay, I've got you," but he's ultimately saying like, "Good soldier," right? Opposed to what happens after Robin saves Batman, they're hugging, and he's saying, "Good boy," like he's saying like, "Good boy," like like it's like a that's like Robin becoming Bruce's son. And then
Yeah.
again, you see that develop into the Jason Todd story where Batman is constantly calling
Mm.
Jason's son.
Yeah, Batman does grow a lot because in the Dick Grayson story, he's like year 2 Batman, I'm guessing, right? He's wearing the black threads and he's very focused on the mission and that it's coming at the expense of this like little boy psyche. And then in the Jason Todd story, he's focused on like helping this little boy, but this boy is so focused on the mission. Like this kid is what Batman was in the beginning. And one little touch that I feel like was intentional was the change of costume where in Robin and Batman, he's wearing like the black suit and then in Robin and Batman, Jason Todd, he grows. He learns to be more compassionate. He learns to be more warm. And so he goes from black to blue. And I
Yes.
just thought that was such a great evolution of both like the internal philosophy of the character, but also like the way he shows himself to the world, you know?
And the Alfred flip, how it's like Alfred is also in the second book, like, I don't know, Master Wayne, maybe we should wait. Or whatever. I know he's not like full like throw him back to the wolves, but like Alfred is more skeptical
Yeah,
in this
because
second
there's a
book.
lot of like psychological trauma Jason has went through, and it's like going on these missions is not the way to fix that.
Yeah.
Like, I think this is kind of sad to say, but like even in mainland comics, I think Jason is a cautionary tale that like Batman bit off more than he could chew, because like sometimes like the solution to trauma isn't to do the mission of Batman, it's to get help and like find people and love people and like find it in your heart to like build a community. And Batman has the Bat family, but he wasn't focused on like helping Jason get that satisfaction until way way long after the fact, where Jason's already Red Hood and then he's a part of the Bat family and then he has his kind of like reclamation and he's a little more emotionally stable then. And I think that's kind of beautiful too. It's like Jason Todd becomes more emotionally stable not because of Batman, but because of the Bat family. Sometimes that is the solution. It's not one guy, it's not one mission. It's about finding community. And so I don't know. I like Jason a lot, and I think the Batman, Robin and Batman, Jason Todd book does a really interesting job at showcasing Jason, because that's another Robin that we don't really have a lot of. A lot of people love Jason Todd Robin, but he's only Robin for like 30 issues, maybe even less, until he got, you know, and so I think a lot of
It's
people
more like
also look at Jason Todd, yeah, more until he got. So I think a lot of people also look at Jason Todd the same way they look at Dick Grayson with the gift of retrospect. But when Jason Todd was Robin, it wasn't for a long time. And like a lot of the characterization people love about Jason Todd doesn't even come from those Batman issues. It comes from post Under the Red Hood, like what other creators were doing with Jason 20 years after the fact when he's resurrected. So it's really cool to see them explore that with a lot of the kind of like knowledge of who Jason will become, and kind of like repackaging his history in a way that like feels like the Jason Todd we know and love, but also can like showcase maybe the darkness in it in a way that those early Batman issues didn't.
I loved both of these books. I think like if I had giving it a score, I think Robin and Batman, the first one, is like a 4.5 out of 5. And I would give Robin and Batman Jason Todd a 4 out of 5. And I think that point, I think there's a couple things. I think the Wraith or Wrath character, what was it, Wraith? Yeah, the
It was
Wraith
weird.
character, the Punisher knockoff, was cool. Obviously, the Dustin Nguyen design and art is
Caveat
amazing.
on that, I was doing some research into it, and Wraith is a character that appeared in 80s Batman comics, and he's supposed to be like a flip of Batman where like his parents
Oh, it is. Yes,
Mhm.
yes. That's
parents were
Morrison's talked
killed
about.
by police, and
Mhm.
so like he takes vengeance on people,
Yes.
and kind of like the Punisher
What?
style. And so it's like What if Batman's parents weren't killed by criminals?
Which is crazy because isn't that what they do with Prometheus?
I have no clue. What
They yes, you do. It's the Morrison JLA run. Prometheus.
Oh, yeah.
That's kind of yeah. He's got like a brown suit, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, in this one, they went extra Punisher mode, and they just made him look like Loki. It looks like a Punisher variant. Really cool design.
No, there's another villain
Cuckoo.
in the Jason Todd book, Cuckoo.
Cuckoo,
Who,
yeah.
like, I was looking that up, and I'm like, that's a completely original character he came up with. Which I don't know. That was a strange decision. Like, I was really trying to scratch my brain and think about it. I'm like, why invent like another bird themed character just to kill him?
They put a dead birdie in the book because it's a book about a dead birdie.
Oh,
That's not ridiculous to say. That's
not ridiculous to say. That's not ridiculous to say. Overall, it's just really interesting to see how these characters kind of develop into their own thing, I guess, except for Tim Drake. But like obviously Robin becoming Nightwing or Dick Grayson becoming Nightwing and Jason Todd becoming Red Hood. In one case, you know, Dick Grayson becomes Batman. It's that legacy that these characters kind of set up. And I think a really interesting story that taps into sort of legacy characters and that second generation and what happens when that second generation is going to take over or possibly could take over is Kingdom Come. Kingdom Come is a story by the legendary Mark Waid and Alex Ross, published in 1996, what I would call the Bible of comic books. What do we think of Kingdom Come?
Greatest DC comic ever published.
Wow, really? I would. Kingdom Come is definitely a 5 out of 5. I don't know if I'd say the greatest. That's hard.
I'd give it like a 4.5.
That's crazy.
I don't think it's perfect.
I was stuck between a 4.5 and a 5 myself because I do feel like the second issue kind of dips a little bit, but the rest are phenomenal.
The second issue is where stuff gets picked up. That's where you get revealed to everything. Whatever, we'll get into that in a second. I think one of the things that I love so much about Kingdom Come, and this is coming from someone who is a casual Superman fan, but it's no secret that Kingdom Come is a very like Superman forefront story. And I love that so much about it because again, there's so many people that just don't believe in the character of Superman. I definitely was one of those people. I still kind of am one of those people, right? It's those people that say Superman is boring. It's people that say that Superman doesn't have bangers, et cetera, right? I think Kingdom Come proves to a lot of people why Superman is ultimately the anchor of, in this case, the DC universe and comics, but you could argue of all comics. And it does that narratively, obviously through the plot and story. But the way Wade's cooking with, again, the like actual like publishing side of it, and the commentary on that, I think is super interesting. When it comes to Superman, we actually have a Superman expert, Chris. I'd love to know. Give us your insight as a Superman fan. What does this story do for Superman? What do you love about this version of Superman? It's an Elseworlds tale too, by the way.
But DC does consider it to be like what the outcome of the universe is going to be. Kingdom Come has been revisited quite a few times, and for the most part, we can assume the DC universe will turn out like Kingdom Come. What I really like about the story and what it says about Superman is basically it flips what everybody's perception of Superman is on its head. Because everybody thinks that because Superman has all of the powers and he does the right thing all of the time to like your eye, the average reader, he should be able to, in a changing world, become a political figure and solve every problem instantly. Hell, he should even be able to do it by himself. But they say in the book, the problem with this isn't that Superman should do it, but it's that he has to lead by example. Like every generation of superheroes has always taken their lead from him in some way or another. Even like as the ages progress, like they were always looking back to Superman. And so when you have him lead by force instead of leading by example, you have this dude who doesn't know, you put him in a puzzle that he doesn't know how to solve. Like that's not how Superman solves problems. And so you get this really crazy conflict that leads to catastrophe.
Yeah, to me, one of the first things that I noticed about Kingdom Come was that it was Mark Waid's, like it was his comic to talk about the shift in comics at the time, in the medium of comics, both to how comics were being published, how characters were being created, And that post Watchmen and Dark Knight Returns tone shift of the medium, where people wanted those darker, grittier, more violent in a way comic books and stories, because of Watchmen and The Dark Knight. Frank Miller and Alan Moore deliver these stories that are still very fantastical because it deals with these fantastical characters, but it grounds it in a way where it's like, well, how would this actually work in the real world? He's talking about the problem with that, with the quality of those stories. Listen, Image Comics, when you think of Image Comics, especially right now in 2026, you're thinking quality stuff. You're thinking some of the best comics on shelves right now. You go back to 1992, they were the best selling comics, but quality wise, they weren't really up there with everything else going on. And I think stuff like the fact that Magog looks like Cable,
Mm-hmm.
and like the extremeness of all these different costumes and how over the top they are, I think it's Wade talking about how it's just people pumping out characters. Let's make a new character. Let's give him this cool costume. And boom, he's in this comic. Boom, million copies sold.
What Wade is saying, I'll use a specific scene from the book to illustrate this too, is what Wade is saying is that they can satisfy one end of the spectrum, which is seeing dudes punch each other, but they can't satisfy the other side, which is the gentility, the human side. That scene in issue 3 where the League go to confront Magog, he's out in Kansas and he tries to lift a house or like a barn, and it collapses in his hand. And the first thing that he does, like his immediate reaction is to get mad at it. He's like, "Why did you fucking break?" And
And
I
he
think what Wade,
blasts it, doesn't he?
and he blasts it. Yeah, he
Yeah.
blasts it.
Like it's like him saying like, "Oh, here's the cool shot. You got to get the cool shot in for no reason."
And I think it's Wade saying that these characters can't handle that side. They don't function in that side because when you use brute force too much and try to put them in that kind of scenario, it's not only jarring, it just doesn't work. You have that scene coupled with the ending of the scene with Superman showing up and telling Magog like, "Oh, like look at this. You must be proud." And it's like, yeah, like you must be proud that these books are doing numbers. You must be proud that these characters are popular, and you must be proud that you're not saying anything every issue.
Damn, you hella cooked right there.
Yeah,
My gosh.
I love that. That's my favorite thing about this book.
Here's my thing about Kingdom Come is
Mhm.
that I kind of interpreted it with a inherent religious framework because I think the book is like forcing you to interpret it with that framework. The book is told through the perspective of a pastor who's possessed by the specter. And so
Mhm.
this book uses a lot of religious imagery. It invokes a lot of like themes and tones that are specifically called to Christianity and Judgment Day and Kingdom Come, right? Like in the
Yeah,
Bible.
the name is a prayer.
And it feels like the guy in this book, the pastor who's possessed by the specter, is supposed to be this observer who's like watching the world fall into darkness. And he literally starts out at the end of the book. He says like, "Oh, I don't need to like make people believe in God, right? Like I just need to like spread a message." And the problem is that like I just don't know what the message of the superheroes is supposed to represent, other than the fact that like they're coming together. And the book ends in such like a bow tie way that it feels like there's no like reclamation of ideology. There's no common ground they're meeting with each other than the fact that like they're sitting together in a cafe. And even more so on that, I want to touch on this point really quick before I let y'all rebuttal. But I think Mark Wade is a little too like I just don't agree with his like personal philosophy on like the comic book industry falling into this vacuous space, because if you think about it as a response to like the 80s and the 90s British Revolution in comic books and the normalization of like a darker and more grounded type of story, you look at these stories and you see what they are. They are The Dark Knight Returns, which is a book that warns about authoritarian control and the rise of fascism, right? It uses superheroes as an analog to keep people educated about the morbidity of the times and like how
Can I ask you
scary
something?
let me finish
Okay.
and how scary these political systems can be. Same thing with something like Watchmen, right? Like Watchmen is a book that warns about the superhero power fantasy and how it's like a form of escapism that can make people blind. And then I read Mark Waid's book, and I can't help but feel like Waid is just like, it's too depressing, it's too nihilistic. We need to return to like the 50s where superheroes were just saving the day and being happy and go lucky. And I'm like, I don't know if I agree with that like cultural analysis, because I do think like the post Watchmen shift is important. And I do think there's so much powerful messaging in comic books that never existed before, the 90s, that became more normalized. And it feels like Waid is kind of like saying like, I don't like this. I want it to return to this golden age. And even at the beginning of the book,
so here's the problem. Here's the problem with your statement. Is you're right. Waid does want it to return to that, but he's not saying that there isn't room for it, because the last issue of the book is still a full-scale battle. You got to remember that. So what they're saying is that the old generations and the new generations need to learn from each other. You can make these crazy ass superheroes. Magog can function in the world of DC, but what the fuck does Magog do when he's not killing people?
Who are the new superheroes besides Magog?
Why does it matter? That's not the point.
That's
America
the point.
Commando,
If the
Red,
point,
White, and
if
Blue?
the point of this
Hold on.
book is that these superheroes need to coexist and learn to like learn better from each other, who are these like I can't tell you their names. I don't think this book focuses on showing you
the name of the characters doesn't matter. It's what they represent. That's what they represent.
What do
and
they
they're
say?
in the future.
Like, what did these young
future
people say in this book?
That they're listen. Your point of like you don't agree with it. Waid isn't saying that, oh, we should have never done Watchmen or Dark Knight Returns because look what it did to the industry. It's Waid is calling out the bad apples. Yes, there is great comics that like ultimately Watchmen and Dark Knight evolved comics and storytelling in comic books. So the good writers are going to write good things. Waid is talking about those people like I'm let's just be real, like the Image guys who are simply writing darker, grittier, and more action-packed stories because that's their misinterpretation of the Dark Knight. They're not. You think Rob Liefeld read the Dark Knight Returns and was like, "Yeah, this is about authoritarianism and fighting fascists"? No, he read it and was like, "Oh my God, Batman's beating the shit out of Superman. This is so cool. I gotta create a character that's a ripoff of Deathstroke, and I gotta create a dude with a big metal arm that has massive, unrealistic guns." That's what Waid is talking about, and that's why I
tag him in the TikTok.
Bro, we're dropping a lot of names right now.
And the thing is, a lot of these guys would even this is no disrespect to the Image guys, but someone like Todd McFarlane has been on record to say, I cannot sell you a comic with a phenomenal story and bad art, but I could sell I could sell a great action-packed story. Hold on. I can sell a great action-packed story with a terrible book. I could sell that to a dog. He said things like that. That's them not having the focus on the quality of the story opposed to how can I make the coolest, most epic thing. It's careless, which is what the second generation is.
Also, the thing about let me say this real quick. The thing about your analysis is that I think it is really interesting, and I think there's a lot to unpack there. But the problem with this book is that I don't know or learn about who these young guns are. Let me finish. The message at the end of this book is that like Batman was kind of wrong, Superman was kind of wrong, Wonder Woman was kind of wrong. These three old heads need to get together and fix their differences to make the world a better place by returning to what the old heads used to do. And then all these young guns can bend their knee and get behind it.
You're
Completely wrong. Let me ask you guys this question. What is the ideology of these young guns? Like, what do they learn? What does Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman learn from these people?
They learn to be heroes.
They don't learn from these young people until they're dead. They learn from each other after the young people have died. It feels like such like a Gen X boomery response to change. Like, we need to get
to change to bad change because what led real quick, Chris, and then you go. Okay. What led to almost the destruction of the comic book industry because these guys were creating comics that didn't have any substance, and because they were just trying to sell. Dude, but that's what Waid is talking about.
You don't know that. You don't even know.
Yes, I do. No, I just told you it. I just told you that's what he's.
I'm asking you about the book, not about the Image guys.
Hold on, you. If we're gonna talk about the book, if the message of Waid, if the book that Waid is trying to say is that we need to return to form and we need to return to tradition, why why did everything that Superman did not work? Why did all of those
tradition
people
is the
die in
Trinity.
Kansas?
Because the tradition is the Trinity. Once the Trinity is back together,
No,
it's all
no.
good.
No,
That's
no.
no.
Think
No,
about
what is-
okay.
what
Think
is the
about the
me- what-
decision.
like,
Think
I
about
Let
the
Brennan, hold on.
decision
Let
that-
Brennan go. Let Brennan go. Let Brennan
Think
go.
about the decision that Shazam made. Right?
Yeah,
What did
the
that
old head.
decision? What did that decision represent?
Billy is not
Billy
an
was-
old head.
Billy's a kid.
Billy is half of the Trinity's age in this book, dude. Billy's
Yeah,
like
but
in his
he's part-
30s.
Not
he's
just
part
that, but
of,
he's
like, the
also
golden
mentally
age.
still like a kid because he never
But
developed
that's
because
why-
Luther brainwashed him.
Hold on. I'm about to cook his ass. That's
him.
why he's the key, is because he's actually younger than all of those old heads. That's
He's-
why it's important for him to make the decision, is because not only is Billy a part of the old guard, he is also the next generation.
he's
So
the
then
brain.
what
most
is Mark Waid
important
saying in
one.
this case then? Mark Waid is saying that, like, if you're younger, you're gonna die and kill everybody and think you're doing the right thing.
What an
Is that Mark Waid's message?
oversimplification.
Billy sacrifices
No.
himself and people still die. So Mark Waid is saying if you're young, you're never gonna make the right decision. You're always gonna kill people, and then the old people be like, okay, everyone's dead
What
now.
kind of
but-
That's such a
stupid
pessimistic
analysis?
way. Yeah, no.
No. Billy's whole thing is
He killed, like,
Okay, hold on. Let me cook right now. So Billy is literally fear-mongered by the rich elite into not acting on fucking saving the world. This has been going on for 20 years. Is that the elite is suppressing him by feeding him fake images of death, destruction, of war? Does that not ring to like our age? Does that not is Mark Waid not saying, "Hey, don't listen to the bullshit, do
But
something"?
then what happens if you do something? That's the point. Mark Waid's call to action is to just die.
Because it's still based in reality.
and
It's
when
not-
you die,
yeah,
you kill
it's-
everyone
it's
else
still-
around you
No.
besides the old
No.
heads.
No.
Sometimes a hard decision will cost lives, even
So,
your
yeah,
own.
the young people should just shut the fuck up and die. And
No,
then
that's
kill
not
everyone
what it-
else. That's how the book
No.
ends. All the young people die.
No,
No, they
That's not
don't.
true.
The entire-
Wait,
no,
really?
they
Wait,
don't.
Who saved in the bubble?
No,
Who
they
saved in the
don't.
bubble? Hold
Okay,
on, who saved
I
in the
wa-
bubble?
do you
said-
wanna
Wait,
know what a
Brennan.
big-
Fucking- oh, no,
Do you want to know what a really big point in I think it was the third issue of the story was? Who gets to make the decision about change and what is allowed, right? And the entire fucking story, Superman is trying to say the old ways, like us, the people of the old way, we are the ones to make that change. We have to definitively do that. And then the younger ones, they don't fucking like that, right? Now, of course, the conclusion of the story is realizing me trying to enforce that my way is the only way and that has to be the way that this is what resulted in the tragedy.
So
The
his
story-
solution
the
is to listen
takeaway
to
of
Batman
the
and Wonder
story-
Woman. And
the
there's no young
takeaway
person
of
sitting
the
at
story-
table. Where are the young
Wait,
people
wait,
sitting
wait,
at the
wait.
table?
Hold on.
The
solution
takeaway
is
of
to-
the story is
Hold on.
to draw from different perspectives. While
Only if
you
you're
may
old. Only if it's Batman and Wonder Woman.
Wait. Let him finish. Let him finish.
no, because
Then who are the young perspectives they're pulling from? I'm asking you guys.
I want to ask you.
Tell
I want to
me-
ask you
Tell
something.
me where Superman,
You who-
Batman, and Wonder
Magog,
Woman
you
sat down
you
and talked
who-
to a young person.
you who
Wait,
The guy
wait.
made decision
All right.
Who
making.
made the
It doesn't
decision?
happen.
Who made the decision about the direction that this universe was going to go? It wasn't the old heads, it wasn't the new heads, it was the bridge, the gap, the gap filler in between. It was Shazam, Billy Batson, okay? And that's the entire thesis of the story. It's that while
So that
I
young
think
people
it's
die.
Wade saying that while I don't like the change or the direction this is going, I can't just completely, disenfranchise what they're doing with the industry. That you need to be able to take perspectives from both ends, the darker, grittier storytelling, but also the more nuanced, lighthearted, and
Yes.
open storytelling. And the conclusion is the decision that Superman and everyone else in the Trinity has learned the lesson that they can't just definitively make. They go to the UN and they go there and they go there with not the idea of enforcing a perspective or enforcing a rule, but of a willingness to listen, to learn, to observe, and to accept other people's ideologies and thoughts and perspectives.
the
That is the
it's
theory
not-
of the thesis of the story. It's not rejecting everything from that era that the comics are trying to address. It's learning to accept it, but also criticizing it.
I think the young people were also writing those stories though. Like this book is a response.
Yeah, but
to
that's not what
what is it?
talking
Frank
about.
Miller's
Wade's not
Dark
talking
Knight
about the
Returns?
people making those great stories. He's talking about the people trying to pull from the hype around those stories who refuse to actually
in pulling
touch on
from the
anything
hype from
meaningful.
those stories, there's also good books as well. That's
And
like how
he's
you
not
got
talking
the
to those good books. He's not talking about those good books.
How do you know that though?
Because Magog looks like Cable, dude. And
Yeah,
the whole
like
he looks like Cable.
You're not gonna cook right now.
And it comes out. The book comes out in 1996. That's 4 years after Image explodes into the scene. Also, I'm glad that you said I don't know who these characters are. I don't know these names. Yeah, that's what Image Comics was doing. Who's Darkhawk or Shadowhawk or fucking
name every member of Gen 13 right now.
Yeah, name all the Gen 13 guys. Tell me besides Grifter, who's a part of the Wildcats during the Image days? Name the Youngblood team, dude. People,
they're not meaningful.
But if you look in the story, you'll see moments of all of these no names fighting and beating the shit out of each other, and then you'll see a point afterwards in the story where Superman recruits some of these randos, and he stops. It's when they're fighting in the neighborhood with that church dude, and they throw the car, and Superman's like, "Hold on, guys. This is all fine and dandy. We're doing the thing. We're supposed to be fighting people. But there's a lady trapped underneath some rubble over here. We should probably help her out because that's part of our job too. In fact, it's the main part of our job."
Yeah, and I would say that Superman rallying up some of these new heads is further proof of the fact that Wade is not talking about every single new head comic book writer, but specifically talking about the comic book writers who, like I said, are pulling from the hype of this darker, grittier era of comics and refusing to actually have a dialogue while they
Magog continues to be a character after.
Let me talk.
Dude, you've been talking a lot. Oh my god. You literally were yelling into your mic as Brendan was trying to talk, you hypocrite. But go ahead, you little baby.
Here's Brendan's analysis, right? So like Shazam is supposed to represent this like intermediate point where like these young people are like trying to find and make the right decision. And then he makes the decision, and what happens?
What else should have happened?
But that's the point.
What could have happened?
I'm telling you to analyze the book as it is. Answer the question. What happens?
Why can't it be real? Why can't it be based on reality?
No. You're ignoring who made the choice, and you're ignoring the other part.
No,
of the
I'll answer the question.
Answer the question. Yeah, go ahead.
I know what who's trying to say. People die. There, a bunch of superheroes end up dying. So here's the thing, though.
No. Let me keep going. Let me keep going because you guys got to do it too.
You paused though. You asked him a question and paused.
He answered the question. That's
no, he didn't.
People die. How does the book end? Who's sitting at the table? Who's making the who's having the conversations? They're talking to the UN, an age-old established institution, and they're talking like three old motherfuckers all just having conversations about what they're supposed to do in the future, right? Like, where are the young people at the table? If this book is about finding the voice and uplifting these people, why aren't they part of that conversation? Why is the book ending with hinting at the fact that like maybe they might have a kid and like, you know, things
the
Trinity is back together.
Where are the new heads?
Yeah.
Right here, you.
Those are all the new
heads
saved in the bubble. Those are all the new heads saved in the bubble.
Highlight where their input is. How are they influencing this decision making? If it's about unity, it just feels like Wonder Woman, Batman, and Superman are just like taking control and doing what they want again.
Right? The young heads are saved. And something that you're hella neglecting is all of those young heads were not on Superman's side. Those are fuckers that were in the gulag. Those are criminals.
Yeah,
and they pulled up after the battle.
Yeah, exactly. And you're ignoring the fact that it's literally confirmed that if Shazam didn't make that choice, that the new heads would have, guess what? Ended the fucking world, Yoo-hoo. Ended the fucking world.
Fighting. They would have kept fighting, and it would have spread everywhere. It would have spread everywhere.
Armageddon. Is that a better ending? The decisions made in Armageddon.
Yeah, how else do you want it to end? How does it end?
Such a pessimistic distillation towards like.
No, you have the pessimistic
supposed to represent. Because to me, the book ends with all of the old people sitting at the table.
You know, it's
Superman locks up all these young guns, and then they're freed from the gulag, and he could be a literal war criminal locking people up, and he could just get back together with Batman, Wonder Woman, Superman.
You know what's crazy?
It's almost like the story frames that all as a mistake.
It's almost like
he wasn't supposed
supposed to
war
do
crimes,
that. And if you're an old head,
You
you
want
get away with it. There's no appreciation.
You-
That's
No,
such an
you're-
extreme.
Hold on,
You're
can I say
so
something? I
yeah.
need to
You're
say something.
trolling right now.
I need to say
You're
something
such an
really quick.
extreme. No,
Let me
that's
get
such
this
an.
You're
off.
choosing to view
Let
this
me get
story in a
this off.
pessimistic light, dude.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, he's trolling.
I
He's
don't
trolling.
think- you can tell me if this is wrong. I don't think you can reconcile with Superman not doing the right thing in this story. Because that's the whole point of this story is that Superman can also make mistakes. That's the whole crux of this. But I
That's
don't think
all
you
he
can
does.
reconcile with that. Well, I don't think you can.
He does.
Well, it sounds like you don't like it. It
I
sounds
don't like
that's
it
not what
because it feels like the solution isn't him like helping these people, helping rehabilitate the people in the gulag, acknowledging how much he messed up.
That's the
It's
mistake
him
he
getting
makes.
back
what he
together
does.
with Wonder Woman and Batman and saying, "Yeah, we're."
It says a year
It's
later,
fine.
by the way. It's like you're also acting like this happened like 2 days afterwards, and then they're at the burger
Yeah,
joint.
What is the ramifications like they actually face in this book besides like a bunch of nameless young people dying?
They're nameless in the sense that like they're just new characters, but that still doesn't mean it's not a ramification.
I want you guys.
It says in the
Okay,
beginning.
you
No,
don't
I'm gonna
read
tell
it.
you right now.
I want to be very
You
clear
don't-
here.
If they
I
did that
s-
for the main DC universe right now, would you not care? If they nuked all of the Titans, if they nuked every character right now, are you saying even the ones that you don't read about? Because that's the point right now,
The
right? Is that
difference
there's no
is that
story for them.
we know the Titans. These are like nameless. Like these are
No,
like,
they're not.
these-
They're
these-
literally all have names and they have extra details. And you have a
Yeah,
trait.
they have to
So
add
I
the
know you have the
I'm about
The
to
appendix.
show you.
trade tells you in the
don't
back of
know-
the book.
Yeah, so if you don't know
But
who
they
these
did
people
use
are,
the
this.
look it up, dude.
Oh, what's
No,
this?
you're
Guess
not
what?
cooking.
Guess what?
What are we
You're
looking
not
at?
cooking.
You
Oh,
guys
listed
are not
characters and
listening
their
to my
names.
point. The point is that everyone knows the Titans. These characters were made for this book, and you don't meet them. They just
Titans
died.
in
They
the book.
existed.
It's 4 issues, you who. What do you
Okay.
want?
Well,
You
that-
want
that's what-
like you want data pages? You want data pages on these guys?
Yeah,
He put it back there for you.
Wait,
There's
I'll give you
yeah.
I'll give you the equivalent of a data page. Here, let me pull it up. I just had it on there for you. It's the one that tells you
what their names are. There you go.
exactly,
I
and
bet you if
it'll bring
Jonathan
you a
Hickman
little
wrote
brief
this, you'd be
description.
all over it, dude.
Yeah.
It's
some circles
4
and lines
issues.
on there.
You're
and you
you're
will love it.
nitpicking this one little thing of they're nameless, blah blah blah. That doesn't change the fact that they're these characters. Matter of fact, you want to know who these guys are? You want to know who these guys are? They tell you in the beginning. The pastor tells you in the beginning. You're gonna do that that's what you're gonna do?
You like Marvel
just-
better because it's more pessimistic, huh? You like it because it ends like, damn, we're kind of fucked with all these superheroes around, huh? That's why you like the Marvels. God damn it, dude.
Low
Move on.
key,
Wrap
you
this
know-
up. Wrap
I
this
don't know
shit
if
up.
you
All
guys
right. At
know,
the end of the
it's
day,
literally-
look, it's all agree to disagree at this point. We're just gonna go keep on going in circles. But that about does it here at Crashout Comics. Thanks so much, everybody, for joining us once again. Make sure to tap in to the upcoming videos as well as the next episode, hopefully very soon. If we don't break up by then, follow for more.